Hello and welcome to the Auto Guide Show. This week we talk about electric pickup trucks, a bunch of SUVs, revisit some Japanese icons, and maybe another Japanese icon is on its way back. But first, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need, at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love. So, kicking things off on the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors, is a comparison that you and I did between two electric trucks and Ford versus Chevy. What a classic battle. Seems straightforward, but these two trucks are not that straightforward.
No. Well, one of them is.
I mean, as truck competitors, and it's weird because one looks like, oh, that's just a car, well, an SUV with a bed, and the other one looks like, oh, it's the exact same truck with electric powertrain, and neither of those facts is really true.
Yeah. I also want to, I feel the need to point out with an F-150 Lightning, Ford has not given it a facelift, even though the gas one has had one. So now there's actually some difference between them, but still, you're going to see hundreds of the pre-facelift gas one on the road. So if you do see a Lightning, you'll just think, oh, that's weird. Someone stuck a tube light on the front? That's really strange. Yeah. I think that's always been part of the appeal, right? Like the F-150 Lightning was one of the very first electric trucks on the market, and it was an electric F-150. That's all it is, and that's, I think, what most people want. Whereas the Silverado EV is I say if they want an electric truck, I assume they want the truck just electric.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's not just an F-150 electric. Like, there's a slight difference in the platform, but yes, it's essentially dimensionally, functionality the exact same. But I thought there was this Tesla pickup truck that was supposed to crush it in sales, yet it still seems to be the best-selling electric truck.
That's weird, huh?
Anyway, back to the Chevy.
Yeah, the Chevy is also strange. As we were talking about this when this published, it's not quite a unibody, and it's also not quite a body-on-frame platform. It's this weird amalgamation, and it has features of both. So that's a long-winded way of saying it drives more like a car. And I think that's a good thing because, let's be real, most people aren't actually using their trucks for truck things these days. They're de facto family vehicles. And so the Chevy is easier to live with in the sense that it rides a little more calmly. It has that four-wheel steering, so you have an excellent turning circle. But it's hefty.
Yeah, it is hefty. Officially over 8,000 pounds. It has no official weight from Chevy, but there's obviously the sticker on the door. But it's heavy, but that's because it has so much more range, because it has so much more battery. The battery pack alone weighs like 3,600 pounds, and it's over 200 kilowatt hour. Again, we don't know the exact number, but and what the exact usable number is. But yeah, it's optimal conditions. You're looking at over 700 kilometers of range, which is like, what, 460 miles, I think?
Yeah, it's 460 miles versus 300 with the Chevy, or with the Ford. But I don't know, the Chevy doesn't seem particularly efficient. It's just there's a huge amount of battery. The Ford's is 130 kilowatt hours. So yeah, it shows that that's always going to be the trade-off, at least now, right? I mean, depending on how battery tech evolves, maybe it'll be less of a problem. Maybe we won't have 3,600-pound battery packs. But for now, that's an issue. And I think the funny thing, like, you were the steward for the Chevy for the week. So I never got to deal with fast charging, but I mean, it seems really strange to me that you could plug into a fast charger and be there for multiple hours.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. I've had this twice, and I had the Hummer, so I'm used to this. Well, you had the Monster Pack in the Escalade. I just don't know how much you actually drained that sucker, but I pulled this one. I didn't go that low, but I pulled both the Hummer EV Alpha and the first Silverado down into the 20s. And yeah, you plug in for like 2 hours. Now, those fast chargers, granted, were barely doing over 100 kilowatts.
Mm.
So if I found a fast one, they just installed some 350s right by me. My closest ones, there were 50s, and they're now 350s. But there's like two, and they share. So I had, completely off topic, but I had my current press car plugged in yesterday, and I was pulling almost 200 kilowatt off of it. And I noticed the other one went down to 120. I was like, oh, so it's not 350 a piece. It's, well, no one was there, thankfully. But anyway, yeah, like $60 in 2 hours of charging. But compare that to a 8,000-pound gas truck, and you're probably paying at least triple that in fuel. So
yeah, and the other tough thing always, which again going off topic, but like fast chargers are convenience. You pay as such. It's like if you're charging at a slow charger, there are some free ones littered around these days, or they're very low cost. If you're charging at home, it's whatever your utility rates are. Yeah, I think fast charging is not a great example of how much it costs to run an EV, but I mean, for some people, it's the only way to charge them. So yeah, it's an unfortunate reality. What did you like and not like about the Silverado? Since you've had one before, so you're a little more familiar with it.
yeah, I mean, well, we'll have to get moving on here. But
Yeah.
I like the four-wheel steer. I like sort of just this general ride. Like it drives more like an SUV than a truck because it is. I don't like that there's no Apple CarPlay. We've ranted about that in the video and the article, and it's so funny reading comments. They're so divisive because people that rely on it like we do fully agree, and people who don't care less are like, this is, who cares? Well, a lot of people care. But anyway,
Yeah.
the weight obviously isn't great. The range is great. The one thing that I talked about, and I think Chevy missed an opportunity, is they called it the Silverado EV. Like they could have called it something along the lines of Avalanche that it looks like. And it even has a midgate. So Silverado Avalanche. My favorite comment was the Evalanche.
Yeah, the Avalanche. Yeah, I see your point, but I mean, if we're talking about name recognition, Avalanche is a one and done from the early 2000s. Silverado is decades.
Well,
So,
it was two. There was two gens. I know I said one, and
were
I
there?
forgot they gave it. There's two gens in about 10 years. I forgot they
Oh yeah,
gave it for the second gen. I mean, those trucks were so similar to begin with. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
we should move on to the next one.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. So, Kyle, you got to see a preview of not a new SUV, but a new version of an SUV.
Sort of a new version. Yeah, so when I was doing the Ford Expedition drive a few weeks back, we were pushed along into a hangar to see the 2026 Ford Explorer Tremor. So that expands the Explorer lineup. There are now 5, and it kind of replaces the old Timberline, which existed for a few years and was this weird kind of halfway trim. I think Ford kind of wanted to turn that into its own subfamily and then realized, wait a minute, we already have Tremor. So Tremor has now expanded to unibodies. We already had that in the Maverick. We have it in the Expedition, the F-150, the Super Duty. Now we get an Explorer. And yeah, it's what you expect.
It's what everyone's doing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All-terrain tires, more rugged looks. Yeah, to the Tremor and Timberland, I think the Timberland was sort of first, but I guess it didn't resonate with customers like Tremor did, and the name Tremor just had more of a backing, so
yeah,
it wins.
There's one important difference between this and the Timberline. The Timberline only had the base engine.
Yes, that's
this
true.
has the optional V6. So the idea of a 400 horsepower off-road model is kind of cool. And I mean, like, the Tremor treatment works really well. I like the orange highlights. I like this color. It has an actual skid plate, which is multiple skid plates for that matter. So I like the treatment. I think it's pretty thorough. And look, maybe most people aren't actually going to use it in a way that's going to threaten those skid plates. But still, I appreciate that they're there, right? I rather this than something that just pretends. I think the ones that pretend are arguably even worse, because then people think that they have a skid plate and it's just a garnish and you're just going to damage your stuff. So yeah, I think this is a good move, and I think it'll sell a significant chunk of Explorers.
Yeah. Shout out to the Timberline for being the original of this trend, even if it didn't itself catch on like things
Hmm.
have since.
Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, a lot of these will get stuck in the sand like a lot of the other ones because people think they have a Wrangler all of a sudden. So, moving on into a different kind of SUV, you took
Yes.
another spin in the Santa Fe Hybrid, which is one of our favorite SUVs. The question is it still?
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is this is the default that I will now suggest to people who are like, I'm thinking of a three row. I mean, sorry, it's my second default. My first is like, hey, are you going to consider a minivan? And then when they inevitably make a gross out face, and go, oh, I'm never driving one of those, then I suggest the Santa Fe.
Hmm.
Um, it's just like, and you've driven it, and we both really like it. It won Canadian Utility Vehicle of the Year. It's just a really good package for when you occasionally need a third row. And the nice thing about the one that I drove is that it is a lower trim, and that's all you need. As nice as the top ones are with more features and stuff, this had this never left me wanting, and it's actually affordable, which is such a rarity these days.
Well, that's the thing with the vehicle is it's such a good vehicle to begin with, and like you said, the occasional third row, it isn't like smaller third rows it competes against where its third row is very useful, even more so
Mhm.
than bigger three-row SUVs out there. There's a many of the so-called mid-size class for the Highlander and the Pilot and all them battle that this is a slightly smaller vehicle, but I'd rather be in the third. And then there's the option that you got into. You could have a hybrid, you could have a Turbo 4, you can have a pretty affordable entry level. You can have a calligraphy that's stuffed full of stuff that the class higher doesn't even have in some vehicles. So to your point about the default, this is actually just my default SUV because you know we always get that I need a new car, I want an SUV, and they give you no other preference. So I say, oh, what about the Santa Fe? And then that's sort of my marker because then I'll be like, well, I need three rows. Well, it has three rows. Oh, it's too big. Okay, now we can go to a smaller one. But
I like
it's
that.
where I start people with.
Nice.
Good to hear it had. Good to hear the shine hasn't worn off as I doubt it would, and it's got cool boxy looks and it's got that grab handle thing.
And yeah, well, not this one. The lower trim does not have the grab handle,
Yes.
but I also like the lower trim's wheels. I just want to call those out. The straight line five spokes because it works with the design, right? Like the calligraphy has these multi spokes that kind of look like they belong elsewhere. This is great.
Not this one.
Yeah.
So, shifting gears completely. Hey, it's another year and another Mazda RX rumor. When I started in this industry about 15 years ago, I think the RX-7 was coming back that year, and I've heard the same thing every
Yeah,
year.
because the RX-8 was on its way out, and it's like, don't worry, there's an RX-7 coming.
Oh yeah, we're talking about its replacement successor because yeah, the R3 had just come out. They're like this is its last hurrah, and the 7. Actually, no, it wasn't 7. Back then, it was always the 9.
Nine.
The RX-9 was coming out, and
Yeah.
still don't know the name, but every time I hear one of these, it's like it sounds more plausible, and then it never happens. So this may be the one because it's actually using some stuff that Mazda already has as opposed to reinventing. So basically, it's not going to be the turbo or lightweight little high rev and rotary sport machine of past. It'll still be a very performance oriented car, but it's going to be a hybrid, and it's going to be more of a electric first plug-in type hybrid where the rotor will be a generator. It sounds like, which is what's in the MX-30 and other markets.
Hmm.
But this will have a twin rotor, so probably just a new version of what was in the 8 and the 7 before it. So more powerful, which means it can power a larger battery and a larger motor. Um, so yeah, I mean, we know nothing other than these rumors. If somehow Mazda could bring this out, I'll set the bar lowish, like let's say 3,500 pounds with uh, a decent sized, I don't know, like 30 kilowatt hour battery pack, over 300 horsepower. Um, the engine can keep it going if the battery's fully depleted. It's rear drive. It's got tons of torque, and it has the usual Mazda handling. They could have something, but if they like, there's a lot of things it has to do, and I'm sure they know that it can't just come out as a, you know, basically a hybrid sedan that just powers the rear wheels and looks sporty. It's gotta live up to the name. But I just don't know
Yeah.
how you do that if the rotary's off half the time. But I
Yeah, and
guess
I
we'll have to
don't
wait and
know.
see.
I don't know. I don't know if the market's there. And like I hate saying that because I want to see Mazda do something like this, but I mean, coupes cars in general aren't doing too hot right now, and I don't think you can bank on, the nostalgia that we have for the RX-7. I don't think you can really bank on that for most buyers. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Mazda is moving up market. If this is, we keep saying new RX, but what if this is more of a Cosmo
Hmm.
successor in terms of being more of like a high end kind of coupe? I'm like, I don't know, maybe the market would like that more.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say the same thing. Like the seven was the real sports car, and the eight was still a sports car, but it was slightly bigger, had a bigger number, it had that rear seat. If this has those demi doors and decent like 2x2 seating, like 4-person seating, where the people in the rear are still somewhat comfortable, and it's slightly larger. I think yes, it could have something. I mean, it's not. I'm not talking the exact same, but something like up around the Lexus LC type competitor, something super stylish that can seat for, hopefully better than the LC, but yeah, because I think well, if they're going for an actual RX-8 or RX-7 successor, I think they've missed like too little, too late. The
Mhm.
Supra and the Z that have already come back, like the Supra's already gone, and the Z is not selling well, and the Camaro and Challenger are gone, and the Mustang, like that sort of sports car resurgence is slowing down, and it's not like they're dead forever. It's just this is the cycle we go through. Everyone buys them, and then they keep them for 10 years and love them, and then they want one then. But in that meantime, there's no market for them. So,
Yeah,
um, well, we'll see. Well, this could just be nothing that ever comes from it. I mean,
would be the first
I
time.
yeah, I can't even tell you how many RX this and RX that so I've seen in the last 15 years. So
Yeah,
here's hoping it does come and it's cool.
yeah.
Speaking of cool, it was actually just yesterday. I was invited to celebrate Lexi's, whatever you want to call it, 35th birthday in Canada. So last year they celebrated 35 years in the States because they started selling in September 89 in the US, but they waited to 90 in Canada. So it was 1 year later. Um, and we went to the TMMC plant in Cambridge where the RX and the NX are made. So we got to tour the facility. They had the entire vehicle lineup there for us to sample, like
Cool.
every vehicle they make. So there's LC Coupe, LC Convertible, all the SUVs. They had some I haven't driven, like the LX700, things like that. And then they brought some heritage vehicles to sort of show where they came from. And they talked about their historical icons over the years and actually had some there. So they had a 90 LS. We were missing the 98 RX 300, which was super important because that was like that built a class. Like that
Yeah,
made a segment. I mean, I know Mercedes and BMW were out around then, but they were still truck based, not pickup truck, but like rear
more
drive.
truckish.
Yeah, whereas
Yeah,
this
yeah,
was they weren't pretending like this was a minivan that was luxurious and a crossover, and
yeah,
everyone has followed that pretty much since. Um, yeah, like they didn't care about off-road capability, whereas the original ML did.
yeah.
But they did have a '03 RX 330, and that was the first one built in that plant in Canada, and it was actually the first Lexus ever built outside of North America, or sorry, outside of Japan.
Hmm.
So the first Lexuses that weren't built at their home plant was in Canada, and that plant has been there forever. It built the Corolla in the '80s, and then it transitioned to Lexus, and by that time, it built Corollas forever. It also built the Matrix
Yeah.
before the Lexus took over. On hand, so they brought the 90 LS, the 95 SC400, which I love that car. It's just such
Yeah.
a nice looking car. They brought an O2 IS300 and the Lexus I talked about. So kind of going through their chronological order, like I talked about the LS showed what they could do. Like everyone knows, like this made the company. The SC showed, hey, we can make something stylish too. Then the
Yeah.
RX was the SUV, and then the IS showed that they can actually make a very sporty car. And
Hmm.
then there's the LFA and other things, but
Yeah.
they didn't
Um,
have an LFA. I guess they didn't have $1 million kicking around to buy one. But
yeah.
so I won't spend too much time here, but I got to drive those three. I didn't end up getting to drive the SC430, which I've driven them before. They're a car. I mean,
It looks like a
they're
bar of soap.
they're a 100% reflection of their time. Like around
Yeah.
then, remember there was an ISC hardtop convertible, and then what was the Infinity G coupe called. It had a hard top. Like they all
Oh
had
yeah.
them back then.
Well, and the Sebring, the Chrysler Sebring was
Yeah,
like the rental car of choice. So like I understand. You're right. It was of the era.
the G6. Remember the Pontiac G6 had a
Oh yeah.
convertible hardtop. Like that, they just all that was a thing that seemed like everyone wanted convertible hardtops because it was the best of both worlds. And then people learned it compromised the car structure. It added weight in weird spots. It gave you zero trunk space, and that trend died.
Yeah.
So anyway, the three I drove. So the LS, you get in it, and it is still so solidly put together after 35 years. Like nothing's squeaking and rattling. It's just so quiet and smooth. That V8 engine, I mean, you can't say enough about the 1UZ. It was such a redefinement for Lexus and even just luxury cars. It showed maybe it wasn't the most powerful, but it made refinement redefined basically.
Yeah.
And the front seats, I haven't been in an LS first year before. The front seats are 100% what Mercedes was putting in their seats. Those sort of very springy, kind of flat, but kind of squishy seat. I mean, anyone who's been in a late 80s, early 90s Mercedes or BMW will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's completely different from how seats are now, but I could
Yeah.
see at the time. This had a power tilt telescopic steering wheel and traction control, which in 90, those are some fancy options. And
Jeez.
it's
Yeah.
funny, it measures, I can't remember the exact number, but like 196 inches long. So it's a full size car, and it's roughly what full size or sedans still are today. But it weighed like 3,800 pounds, which is like how much an IS 350 weighs now. So
Yeah.
yeah, times have changed when you start stuffing screens and computers and safety equipment. But
Well, I mean, an ES is like roughly the same size, but it's a little lighter. A current one, slightly.
yeah, and back
Yeah.
then it was same thing. It was a little smaller still because that was sort of the front driver. But this has 205, 65, 15 tires, which is also hilarious because that's what the base Corolla comes with. This is a luxury car, but it's just a smooth roller down the highway. And then the other one I got to drive, the SC 400, it it's definitely more of a tour than sporty. It looked awesome, but oh man, is it the suspension and body just likes to wallow and lean,
Yeah.
and the engine's so smooth and 4-speed automatics. You don't realize how much we're spoiled with all these multi gears. You think there's too many, but then you get back in a 4-speed, and it's just like, when's it ever going to change gears or accelerate? Because it just has to go through such a large RPM band, but it just looks cool. It has decent space inside, even for taller people, which was not a thing back then for a lot of sporty cars. And yeah, it's just so cool. It's not something you buy if you want to go rip around canyon roads, but it was designed more to battle like the Mercedes SLs and
Yeah.
the V8 8 series BMWs, not the sportier ones or the V12s. And at a time it did well. And then when you get in the IS 300, which is at the time 7 years later, but really development 10 years later, it's crazy how much things have changed. That thing has, oh, sorry, the SC has the biggest steering wheel. It's like you're driving a yacht, and the steering is so vague and so overboosted, and the ratio is huge, but again, reflection of the time.
Yeah.
Getting the IS, steering is so stiff, so precise. That inline six is such a good engine. I mean, it's a 2JC relative, like what you
Yeah.
expect. It only weighs like 3,200 pounds. Like it's light for its time. That SC was only 3,500. So even though it's 215 horsepower, it's lighter than a Civic. So that's a good power to weight to the rear wheels. And the 5-speed automatic, it's leaps and bounds ahead of those 4 speeds. And it has those trick buttons on the steering wheel where on the front you can make it shift down, and on the back you can make it shift up, which responds good enough, but you don't need them. And then you got the watch like chromatic chrono gauge cluster, which is so cool. The Altezza taillights, like who didn't want those on a car around that time? Just driving it, it's so well put together. Chassis, engine, transmission is not the sportiest car. It's also not the most comfortable, but it's such a nice balance. Like it was going after the 3 Series, and they came as close as you possibly could back then. I said, give it modern technology, screens, and updated sheet metal, but keep the same basic core, and you could sell today. It'd be fully competitive as like an A3 2 Series whatever competitor. But like that, I don't think it gets enough credit. I know it almost seemed overhyped in its day, and maybe it was, and because of that I think people don't realize how important it was. But yeah, coming out of the SC I want because it's the coolest, but the IS I could totally daily drive still. There's some people in my neighborhood who still have them, and I'm always like, why do you still drive that old car? I fully get it now.
Yeah. I'm very jealous. I was originally supposed to go on this, but as we'll talk about a little bit later on the what's next portion, I had something else to do. But this looked incredibly cool. So it's nice to get that framing reference too. Like that's why we drive these old cars every once in a while on these events is to get a better understanding of the modern lineup. And it sounds like you got that. So awesome.
Yeah. So we'll just quickly go through this last story because we are running
Oh
long
yeah.
already. Nissan decided that they needed to make more Nismo models. Awesome. More Nismo, the better. Altimas, Sentras, GTRs, Armadas. Yes, that is what they're doing. And this isn't, oh, they're Nismoing an Armada because they're going to make it like this crazy off-roader. No, they already have that. That's the Pro 4 and the Pro 4X.
Yeah.
This is a road version of the Armada with a Nismo street tuned suspension that sits a little lower on the air ride, high performance all season tires, 460 horsepower, which is up from 425, even up from 450 in the QX80, and a snarly exhaust, and of course the Nismo exterior that looks like the GTR and the Z with the red accents everywhere. You can get a regular color and get a toned down version if you want, but I don't think anyone's spending this kind of money on a super truck. So their thinking is they have these pictures of it towing a Z to like a track day, and it's like for the person who needs to haul the family or like a big boat or a race car but still want something sporty daily. You know what? It's niche and it's a little out there, but it's crazy and it's the right kind of crazy for me. It's just
It
I want to drive it. Like, don't get me wrong.
it's existed in the Middle East for years.
Yeah.
So I guess they figured, well, I mean, given the trajectory in North America and rolling back fuel economy things and everything, why not bring it here? It looks
Yeah.
ridiculous. I don't know. I like ridiculous. This one maybe it just hit me at the wrong time of the week where I'm just like, I don't understand. I don't get it, but I'm sure it's going to be a laugh. I'm just preemptively like wincing, wondering what the ride is like.
Well, yeah, like I said, the Patrol Nismo has been a thing for a long time. And they obviously sold them. Yeah, because it's so comfortable and it's so not sporty. We have a comparison coming up where we compare the regular Armada, to something else. So, how like are you going to make it handle a little better but sacrifice ride? Or it's got the air suspension, maybe not. But I
Yeah.
would get it in a more subtle color. But I think it looks cool and yeah, good for them. Anyway, that's it for our news and reviews. We are going to take a short break, and then I'll be back with Greg to talk products, and then you and I will be back with our guest. I'll talk F1, and we'll wrap it up with what's ahead. Swapping out your tires? There's nothing like it. With eBay, you'll find the feel you're looking for, from smooth highway rides to grip for rough terrain. Get all the tires you need at prices you'll love. eBay, things people love. Okay, welcome back. We have Greg joining us again, and what product are we having on this week?
All right, we're going to talk about cargo liners, which if you carry around a lot of different things, I know many people have gotten into that sort of last mile delivery, sort of thing, or you have a pet where you may feel a need to protect the back of your car, that cargo area or that fold down third row. Things like this are very essential. The one we're going to talk about is by its 4.9s. It almost looks like 4K9s, I think, depending on how you pronounce it. This is one, but there's a lot of good ones out there. This one will cover your whole back seat and cargo area. Comes in a variety of sizes. This one is a lovely tan color, but you have some different options and price points depending on how big the amount of things you're trying to carry or how big your dog is. You can customize what size you're looking for, and the prices then correlate, along with the sizes. And I think honestly, it's good if you need to, say you have a dog like I do that has a lot of fur. Put this thing down. You can save some time for vacuuming, especially if you know, hey, I'm going XYZ. The dog is coming with me. Throw the cargo liner down. So it's a pretty useful, versatile, I think, piece of gear for your car that can make cleanup a little bit easier, perhaps even less necessary. And it's for life with pets, as Chewy says, this is a pretty good thing.
Yeah, and like you said, even just hauling other sort of cargo, because a lot of people have a cargo liner like I do. I even have a rubber one from WeatherTech, and it's great. But when you put your seats down, it doesn't cover that. And I know some cargo systems have protectors that go on the seat backs too, but you still have all the cracks between the seats and the cargo area. So this is like one solid piece. So if you're carrying like dog with a fur or something that is loose that could get dirt and debris all over the place, it's great because it's just a quick vacuum all in one spot as opposed to, half of it falling behind your seat and stuff. So no, they're good systems.
Yeah, systems is a good way to put it because it makes the back cargo area of your vehicle a little bit more usable. And, even pets aside, if you go camping, if you go like wakeboarding, whatever like sort of maybe outdoor thing, even sporting equipment you need to put back there, this can help. It makes it just a little bit, more seamless, a little easier to clean up, and, just pretty useful. I know you and I both like to go camping with our families, and stuff like this can make it so, hey, when you're throwing that sleeping bag back in after a couple nights on the ground, all the dirt and hopefully not fleas and ticks or whatever that may come with it are protected by things like this. So pretty useful systems, I think, and, saves a little wear and tear on your car. I've also noticed like a lot of, you guys probably have like, delivery drivers who like, it seems like your stuff doesn't even come from Target anymore. It comes from just people who are dropping stuff off from Target. And I've noticed a lot of, these last mile delivery folks are using this. I was just in New York City and it seemed like every cabbie or Uber driver was putting things down in the back rows of their vehicles. So it's a common sense thing. I think when you kind of look at these different groups of people that really need to use their vehicle, when they're using stuff like this, it seems like a good idea for the rest of us.
All right, well, sounds good. Thanks for joining us. And yes, these are very important for certain people, certain vehicles. So we will have you on again sometime soon. Until then, take it easy.
See you later.
Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can handle, you start to think to yourself, you know what, I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks and struts, and this baby deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there. It's unreal. From wipers and headlights to cold air intakes, exhaust systems, and even that turbo you've had on your mind, eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams. And you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. Because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major, and mods are always intense, so you need to know that these parts guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And in the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back, simple as that. You know what you love more than the car itself is driving it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance, and you're locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info and get the exact parts that fit. When you see the green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. So now that you know all that, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at your car you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible. Whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. All right, welcome back. Well, this week we have a guest that those watching or those listening may recognize. It is Colin Wood, who comes on and does our F1, but we thought we'd chat with him because some of you may not know who he is or how he got his start here, so we'll chat about that in cars. Welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here and in a different capacity today, I guess. So,
yeah. So when we have guests on, as you know, we usually just talk about how they got into cars and sort of their abbreviated journey, and then what they owned and what wish they owned. So let's start at the beginning. Were you born into a family of car lovers, or is it something you developed on your own, like myself?
It was on my own. Yeah, I did not. I was thinking like my dad owned a Buick, and I think if you're like of an older age, you might think, oh, was that like a cool Buick? And it's like, no, it was like peak General Motors had given up on itself, like 95 Buick LeSabre. Like, this is the most bland vehicle you could imagine. There was no There was no automotive passion in my house at all. Nobody watched. My dad actually, he watched Formula One, I should say.
No.
So that was there, but he always ebbed and flowed over different sports. So he was like huge in NFL for years, and then just totally stopped or whatever else. So he's actually a giant NASCAR fan now. But yeah, he loves something until he loves it so much he gets like annoyed with the politics and then bounces. So he still watches F1 though. So, but yeah, there was no automotive love. I didn't really have it until actually until I went to buy my first car. Like I was in university, and I remember I was taking the bus to university, and it was miserable. I lived in Ottawa at the time, going to Carleton U, and it was cold, and it was like I think it was actually like December 1st. And actually, I've told the story. I had this vivid memory. I'm waiting at the bus stop, and it just starts to snow. And then the bus gets there at the bus, and it's like this guy gets off, and he looks like Santa. Like he's got this big bushy white beard, and it just hit me like winter is coming, right? Like, oh crap, I need to get a car. And I had dithered, and because I was starting to get interested, and I had looked at like I almost bought like a second gen Supra. It was like the T-tops convertible. It was like, oh, it was so nice, but I took it to get it checked out at a dealership, and they're like, this is a pile of crap. Like you should not buy this car. Then I almost did the same thing with a Mustang. It was the Fox Body, the Cobra, and it was like this. It was like this green and gold two-tone. Like it was very nice. Also a piece of crap. So, and I think my father was helping me through all this, and he's far too pragmatic. So I ended up not buying any of these. Finally, when that snow started coming, I was like, bit the bullet, bought a Civic, and the tuning. Canadian. Yeah, I know. The tuning bug hit me. I remember my father thought I was crazy. The car had like 206,000 kilometers, and which again for a Civic is like, just getting broken in. So
yeah,
I bought that. My father thought I was nuts. It was a manual. I didn't know how to drive stick, but I knew I wanted to. So I had a buddy drive it home from the dealership for me, and just learned that way. And and then the tuning thing kind of caught on from there. That was peak. I would say I was old enough to have like a modified Honda Civic before Fast and Furious came out. So like it was like I was already in that culture when that culture started taking off. Mm-hmm. It literally started with a stupid thing of like, I needed like one of my side light bulbs went out on the corner lights, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to buy a new bulb for that. So it's like, oh, well, I can get these nice like clear markers instead of the yellow ones. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And my brother said to me, he's like, oh, you're not gonna be one of those guys that tunes his Honda Civic, are you? And I was like, no, not me. And then kaboof, one thing led to another. And there was a lot of tacky stuff in the early days too, and big subwoofers and stuff like that. But
oh yeah, no one wants to remember some of the stuff they did to the first car. It's funny how you talked about the Supra. Like I remember, because we're about the same age, the amount of people I knew late high school, but especially early university, who had not the best ones, but the non-turbo Mark III Supras and front-wheel drive Stealths and all these cars that people would kill for now. But back then, it was like, it's the one no one wants, and it's cheap, and I'll just buy this, and it seemed like nothing. But when I bought my first car, my Alero, I stopped on the way home and bought those cool blue headlight bulbs to put in it. Like I didn't even wait till I got home.
Mike.
Yeah. But they didn't, like, you didn't have halogen kits back then.
It's true.
LEDs. Like this is almost 25 years ago. So
I know.
Yeah.
It was there was like this underground scene of like you people are like, oh, like I knew where like the performance shop I used to go was called Final Lap. And it was, I'd go there, and it was like all these cool cars. And if you told people, they're like, "Oh my God, you went there!" It was kind of like, you went to like a speakeasy or something, right? It was like this. Mm-hmm. It was actually like behind this industrial area, and And actually, I say it's funny. I'm gonna totally like, be like a vertical scope advocate here in all of our forums and stuff. But I basically got on a car forum in my like early days in Ottawa. It was called Redliners, I think. There was these guys that used to go out and like, do illegal drag racing at night, and they'd go to these like meetups. And so I got on there. There's a ton of trolls, and, everybody's, having a good time and getting way too serious about non-serious things. But I got to know some of these people to the point where I vividly remember I was driving one night home from work. this guy in this like white CRX pulls up next to me. And we're at like a red light, and he rolls down his window. He's like, "Hey, you want to drag race?" And I was like, "No." And he's just like, "Oh," he's like, "Are you chicken or whatever?" And I'm like, "No, I know what you have under the hood." I'm like, "I know that's not a stock engine." And I was like, "That's like a B20 or whatever." He's like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "You're on this website." And he's just like, "What?" And so we actually stopped at Timmy's, and we like had a coffee and chatted, and it was you started to like make friends. Some of these guys were total jerks, right? But some of them were. I always find a lot of them were jerks online, and they were great people in reality. So I met those. There was no racetrack in Ottawa back then, so we used to go to there was a Luskwheel, which was a drag strip. So we would go drag racing. That was kind of a cool thing in the early late 90s, maybe. Really, it always pissed me off because when I moved from Ottawa to Toronto, it was like I want to say the next year they opened Calabogie, which is like Calabogie is an exceptionally nice racetrack. Like it really is. And I think, crap, yeah, I would have been like in that culture potentially. So, but now I live 25 minutes from most sports, so I can't make any excuses here either.
It's so funny because we used to drag race all the time too, like actual drag race, go to the track. When I was in my first couple cars, that was the thing. They weren't fast, but it was the cheapest way you could really, test your car without overly abusing it. Because when you start lapping, it's more expensive, and then you're burning out tires and brakes and who knows what else. Whereas here, it's a little bit of rubber.
That is a good point.
To your 90s car culture, like I know what you mean. I wasn't into it yet, but I remember guys with CRXs. We had a guest on, one of my friends, not too long ago, and his brother in the late 90s had a early 90s, mid 90s Accord Coupe, and he put the GSR engine in it and converted it to 5-speed. Like he put the whole drivetrain in, and he didn't race or anything, but he knew all those guys, and he'd go out with them at night, and like I think have coffee, maybe go watch them and whatnot. And like it was such an underground thing. And then
have coffee.
Yeah, well, his car wasn't fast enough, but it was such an underground thing. And I remember thinking like that's so cool. And I would hear them because there was a 4-lane road they built years ahead of development, and it was long and straight, and people would drag race there all the time. It was like such a known place, and it was so close to my house I could hear people out there. And growing up, I was like an F-body V8 guy, so I was always like, what are these guys with these tuned CRXs? Like, why would you do that? That's so dumb. And then as I get older, like, oh, that was such a cool car.
Yeah, it's funny, but it was a great thing. And we think about back with the racetrack stuff, like it was it's very intimidating, I think, going to a racetrack, especially if you're not familiar with it, et cetera. And so I don't know if I would have gotten involved, but the drag racing was an easier sort of level entry, right? Like it's everyone knows how to drive in a straight line, and you just practice launching. And it was back when all the WRXs first started coming out, and people were just grenading their clutches all the time, and because they were used to front wheel drive cars that would just or big heavy rear wheel drive cars spin their wheels no problem, and then combine all-wheel drive with a big 5,000 RPM clutch drop, and you often had a broken transmission. And it's funny because those era of WRXs got known for, people used to comment they have glass transmissions. And it's like, well, no, you just drove them like an idiot. Right? You can't, that's part of the problem.
Yeah. So spent a lot of time talking about your early cars, and then fast forward to where you are now. So you didn't just jump to working in the auto industry. How did you get started? And was it something you were like, I'm going to work in the car industry, or is it something you kind of lucked into like 99% of us?
I made a committed decision to do this. I was like, I started at, I got my car. I kind of got into the tuning industry. I got interested. I was sort of pursuing a journalism career at the time, which I guess I'm in. I got a job at the Ottawa Citizen newspaper. Before then, I had done a little bit of like freelance work here and there. Like I'm trying to remember now. There was a Canadian like tuning magazine, and I did some work with it. I can't remember what it's called now. Inside Track was like the name of the publication, like the bigger company. But they used to do a lot of like Canadian like grassroots motorsports type stuff, and so I did some writing for them, and then eventually I got this job at the Citizen, and I chatted with the wheelsetter. I got my sort of got myself together and went over and chatted with the wheelsetter one day. Was like, hey, like, do you ever need anything? Do you need any help? And he was like, well, if you have any cool ideas, like, bring me a story pitch. Don't just ask for help, but bring me a story pitch. So I because of this forum, I was like, oh, I know these guys, and I knew guys at the time who had like just brought over like Sylvias from Japan or GTRs or whatever. There's actually a guy I know who he's a dentist in Ottawa now, who way back when he brought over some like R32 GTR, and I basically, I can profile these guys who brought these like crazy right-hand drive performance cars, the stories. And at the time, especially, they were like, nobody's ever heard of this. They're like, that sounds like a great story. So I interviewed them. I took photos. I did most of that pro bono. Like I got paid a little bit, but it all kind of snowballed together. There's a guy, Rob Bostelar, who was the wheels editor there. And there's another guy who was, it was funny, sort of semi wheels editor. His name was Derek McNaughton, who I think you've probably met. So Derek's still around doing all kinds of different things. I saw he just bought himself a Ford Transit van and transformed it into an overlanding machine. So that's super cool. So Derek was like an advocate for me as well. They're like, young guys interested in cars, and they'd help me out. And they would do things where I have a great memory. I went over to the wheels editor one day. He told me, because he would be like, I have a car that we can go check out. Like, oh, cool. The new, whatever latest thing, like you guys are used to getting press cars all the time. I was, 19 or something and being like, oh my God, they have this new cool thing. So I remember he told me he was going to have an S2000. And I was like, ooh, very excited. So he's like, yeah, come by my desk on Friday and we'll go check it out. So I'm like, amazing. I show up at his desk on Friday, like lunchtime. He's like, well, I got bad news and I got good news. And I'm like, what's the bad news? He's like, well, he goes, I don't have time. He's like, I got a meeting that's going to push over lunch. I don't have time to go check it out. I'm like, well, what's the good news? He's like, here are the keys. And I was like, amazing. And I took it out. I went a little rip on the highway, drove it around. It was just like, it was, yeah, I couldn't have been happier. I actually got like, I keep rambling on stories, but I guess maybe that's the point of this thing. I vividly remember I pull up to like a stop sign, and I'm probably again like 19 years old, like first year university, and these couple of like senior high school girls walk by in this car, and one of them actually looks at me, and she's like, "Your car is so hot," and I was just like, "Sold! Like buy this immediately." I'm like, "Oh my God." Whatever it takes. I did eventually buy an S2000 many years later, but
yes,
yeah, I was like that may have been my motivating factor. Not that the handling and that exceptionally nice 6-speed wasn't, but yeah, it was a great car.
Well, we met after your S2000 days, unfortunately. When we met, you had that Acura 1.6 EL, which the US didn't get. It was the fancy Civic, and that thing was like a testament to Honda's "Don't Die." Like that thing. Yeah. Didn't deserve to be on the road for about 10 years after you're still driving.
I got rid of it. So that was actually my wife's first car. We have this process, it feels like, where she gets a new car and I get the hand-me-downs, right? So we buy her a car for her and the kids and whatever, and then whatever is like old and crappy, I drive it till it's like an unreliable beast. I keep cars till they die. There's something about me. And so that car we actually had till it was 21 years old, and it was still driving. And at a certain point you replace a bunch of things. Like at one point, it's like, the shocks went. So I remember I called up like Eibach and I was like, hey guys, can you do me a favor and send me some new shocks? And they're like, well, we could cut you a good deal on springs too while we're at it. I'm like, okay, lowering springs are in too. It was like a mild, but over time when things broke, I just replaced them. And I never went crazy. It did have an aftermarket exhaust, but it was like one of like the most subtle aftermarket exhausts you could find. I was like, just keep it like drivable, because I still wanted that. But yeah, like that era of what was effectively a Civic was great, and it lasted forever. And it was every now and then I'll see one. The 1.6 EL, and it was like that was really in an era when you couldn't get premium small cars like that. Those just didn't exist. It was emerging, right? Getting like this was before an Audi A3 existed or any of that stuff. And again, Canada being much more sort of European than America, and everything being more expensive here too, that kind of caught on earlier, where people would buy a premium level smaller car. And I mean, the EL was by no means, super fancy, but like the top, it had leather and it had like the upgraded sound system and it had the sunroof and it came in some nicer colors and stuff like that. It was a solid car. Drove it for forever and ever through. I think I drove that thing to Chicago with Dave Pratt, who I think you had on here once, to drive a Viper ACR at a track day. That was like the sole purpose of it, and I like pounded in 8 hours in a day just so I could get there and drive a Viper because I have a death wish apparently. So
yeah, that's a bit of a swing. Like fancy Civic, Viper.
Yeah. The Viper was like, I still go back. It was like one of the most alarmingly wild cars of like because I had driven. I missed a little bit of the story there of like I went from the stuff that all the work I'd done at the Citizen. And then basically had this great portfolio that when I saw this job open up at Vertical Scope for, at the time, it was called Modified Luxury and Exotics Magazine. It was a high-end car magazine. I had this great portfolio. I applied. I got the job. I moved to Toronto. It was like, hallelujah, it was amazing. And I was like peak baller on a budget. Like, I had no money. And I was driving these super exotic cars and stuff. And so I remember I got to drive like a Murcielago back then and all these other wild things in Germany on the Autobahn. I remember like when I first drove that Viper, comparing it to like a Murcielago would be like the most relevant thing at the time. And the torque of the Viper was just like next level. It was like when you put your, like you always feel like that power that hits you like right off the line on really good performance cars. You get that same level of acceleration when you're already going like 90 miles an hour. Like you're already doing that, and then you put your foot down and it still hits you like, holy shit. Like you're just like, I can't believe that power. And it was a terrifying amount of power. And it was very awesome though. And good to have it on a proper racetrack.
Yeah, that seems to be the impression. It's funny. I was just on an event and someone was talking about the first gen Viper, and they're like, never have I driven a car that wants to kill you quite like a Viper. And it sounds like that was the case.
I don't think it ever ceased. It got more refined, the Viper, over the years in terms of the different, like, they added cup holders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it never got any less willing to kill you, right? Like, and that ACR had like the massive like rear downforce and stuff like that. And maybe that, like, yeah, you have to be a pro to exploit that stuff, but it was still just bonkers power. What a dangerous machine. Wild.
I never got to drive a Viper. The last gen was around when I started, but it was like out for a couple years, so no one was putting them on press fleet. But it's funny. I think everyone that does this job remembers the first time they get in a car, they're like, okay, this is beyond my limit. I need to take it easy. Because I remember for me it was I can't remember exactly. I think it was 2013, but it was the Ford Shelby GT500. And this, like, I'd driven plenty of cars then and since with that kind of power, but it was way too much power for that version of the chassis. Like a 650 horsepower, which back then was a lot. Like Lamborghinis and Ferraris were barely making that. And to the rear wheels, and the first time I drove it, it was pouring rain. And I remember just like breathing on the throttle, and it went sideways. And I was like, oh my God, even with stability control. And I never tiptoed a car so much. And then the next day when it was dry, I was like, okay, now I can take it out. And it was still a handful. And I remember the Camaro Z01 was there for me to drive back to back. And it was like so docile with the same power. And I just couldn't figure out the difference between these two. But yeah.
I remember there was I somehow back in those magazine days too, I convinced myself onto the press launch for it was the SL65 AMG Black Series,
nice.
Which was like a bonkers machine, right? It was crazy. That was back when, what was his name? Jeff Day, maybe? He was the PR guy for Mercedes, who was like a legendary PR guy, the kind of guy who like would do anything. He was hilarious. Just outrageously over the top sort of personality. Would just be like, oh, hey, Mike, you want some scotch? And you'd be like, oh, yeah, I'll have that like $2,000 bottle. Ha ha ha. And he'd be like, boom, it'd be there. And you'd be like, that was a joke. Like, you shouldn't do that. This is like, and he'd be like, I don't care. It's Mercedes money. And you'd be like, this is weird. That press launch, and it was at Laguna Seca, and driving that car. And it's funny that, again, people know the corkscrew so well. But the turn, like whatever number it is coming out of the corkscrew, when like you're down out of the corkscrew, and then you keep it's still like it's off camber, it's downhill, it's like a left-hander, and you're like, I was coming through there and I just kind of held on. I was like, oh, I scared myself. I was like, oh man, like this is a lot of car. I need to be more careful. The Mercedes guys were very nice to have me along back then. So
you're talking about a bucket list car for me. Not even the Black Series, but that's the ultimate. But like Colin and I've talked many times about video games and Gran Turismo and whatnot, and I was a car nerd, like in magazines, and as always, the SL65 always was like, because the 63 was cool, and then the 65, like it was the first car where you're like, this is like dumb amounts of power in a car.
1,000 pound-feet of torque.
Well, it was only like 730 something at first because, and they said it could make way more, but that was all the transmission could handle.
Yeah.
And no one else had a transmission powerful enough to take that much torque, which nowadays you're like 700, that's nothing. Well, back then, you know, Corvettes maybe had 400 and like the Ferraris didn't even have that much torque. And Mercedes like, here's a big coupe with a stupid, was turbo V12? Or
I think it was like a bi-turbo V12 or something.
Yeah, they're like, it's a 6-liter V12, and you're like, dang, that's a big engine. They're like, we also put 2 turbos on.
Yeah. You could, and again, you know, if you were in Germany on the Autobahn, you just like rip that thing up to 300 kilometers an hour and no problem. That was a bonkers car. Good overall time at that press event. I like earlier days of my career were I think like one of the very first press events I was ever on, because I started, I guess, in Canada, went to some local ones. I think the actual first ever press event I went on was for the Hyundai Elantra GT. The Elantra Touring, that's what it was called. That one, right?
Wagon?
Yeah, the wagoning type thing, right? So it was that, which is like, you know, but even that blew my mind. It's like a press event. It was in like Victoria, and it was like this beautiful lodge, and I met like the all the movers and shakers in the Canadian press. But then as built AutoGuide later on, when AutoGuide happened, because the story is the magazines got sold off to Source Interlink, which is Primedia, Motor Trend, etc. It was there for a couple of years. They closed them down. I came back to basically launch AutoGuide.com with the current ownership, and then I was trying to I think actually one of the very first launches, it may have still been the magazine days, I'm not sure, maybe it overlapped, was actually for the Nissan GTR. And it was both, it was nuts. Like I remember, and like, I remember it was such a different time that, the information, because it had launch control, and like, that was like a revolutionary thing. And I remember we went to the press launch, and me and this other journalist, we're like, well, how do you do launch control? And they wouldn't tell you, right? That was not, it was a secret, but it was on M5 board, which is now a forum that Vertical Scope owns. And I remember looking it up on my BlackBerry and like trying to load web pages on a BlackBerry and like getting the sequence of you do these 3 things and it'll do it. And but that launch was also like eye-opening, because it was all the auto journalists in Canada at that point were old. Like there was no young people at all. I was the only young guy. And then I go to the States, and I'm on this press launch for the GTR, and I think Johnny Lieberman was there, right? For at the time, he was probably working with like Jalopnik or something. Calvin Kim was there, who was at that time with Road and Track, who now works for Porsche. There was all these guys, and I remember like I walked over at lunch, because maybe it was breakfast in the morning, and I sat down and I saw there was like 3 young guys. I'm like, oh, who are you? I'm like, I am also a young guy, right? It's like, how do you do, fellow kids, right? And fellow youths, and it was just like, I'm like, oh, this is cool. And they were so welcoming and nice. And I was just like, oh, this is, because I felt like the old guys in Canada at that time really had a chip on their shoulder, internet thing, what's going on. And everybody, I think the US, just being a bigger audience, had, they had the Edmunds.coms, the Cars.coms already. So I just got there, and they were, sort of grew, and you get to meet those people, and you're like, holy crap. Like I'm in here with the cool kids. Like what's going on?
I started, like when you started the industry way ahead, but when you started with AutoGuide, I followed maybe a year or 2 later, roughly, and got into the same industry. And I remember, I was 30, I think, but I was the young guy. And there was me and you and a couple others. Like at that point, there's a little core of us and everyone's like, oh, these are the young up and comers. And I'm like, really? But compared to some of the other people. And then shortly after, our old coworkers, we had some on the show, like Sammy, were the real young guys. But I don't think there was a possibility to be that young and be in this industry in Canada back then. So.
We grew something, and then I was like, I wanted to hire people, and I was never going to get the money to hire the Mark Richardsons or whoever guys from the Toronto Star. It wasn't going to happen. So it was like, I had to find people. I found Sammy on Twitter. At the time, he was doing IT for Sick Kids Hospital. But he was tweeting about cars all the time. And I messaged him one day. I was like, hey, like, what do you know about cars? Like, I need people. And that was kind of a bunch of those things came from there. And Jody, it's funny, Jody, she actually turned me down for a job, and because I was like, I was like, she's awesome, gotta hire Jody. And then we had a conversation, and it didn't. She ended up going to the Post, and at the time, like going to a nationally recognized newspaper was a much better career path for her, right? But then years later, she was like, "The Post isn't working out. Do you have any jobs?" And I was like, "Absolutely, we do." So, good people like that to work with throughout the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You look at the group from 10, 15 years ago, and so many are in the industry all over the place. You got people at OEMs, people have their own channels, people got their own podcasts and freelancers. So.
And now I'm the old guy.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because I go to some events and I don't feel like I'm the old guy yet, but it's like there's the old guys who were like the people our age when we started that were like, oh, they're like the in-betweens, and that's what I feel like. We're the crossovers. We're not quite the old guys, but we're definitely not the young guys.
Yeah. It seems I mean, maybe not surprising that like COVID kind of changed things with that, right? Like a lot of people who were on the verge of retiring were like, yeah, I'm just gonna go now. And then some young folks have really come in, like you were saying, Colin, like going to US events. You see a lot of fairly young folks, guys and girls now, which is great. And like we're getting different opinions and different viewpoints.
Totally.
And it's great.
And there's so many, like YouTube changed that as well. Like it changed, it used to be, because I actually remember there was one of the guys at Honda who called me one day saying like, hey, Colin, like, I know you're kind of younger and you guys do YouTube as well. Like we do both, like we're a website and we do YouTube. He's like, there's a lot of these just straight YouTube channels. They don't do anything but YouTube. And should we be inviting these onto our events? And I was like, absolutely, you should. I'm like, there's a whole lot of these guys who have way bigger audiences than anybody else. Like the guy who writes for the Salt Lake Tribune or something like that. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Sorry, Salt Lake Tribune, if it still even exists. I was like, you should absolutely be finding. And there are people in these niches that are not aware of it. Same like when the TikTokers came on. It's like, great, like find them. Like, yeah, don't invite them all. Like find the ones who are good. And who are also, I think one of the challenges for the OEMs I know is like, you can find people who get an audience, but you also have to find people who are professional, right? Because there are a lot of people doing that, and they'll come to your press event and they will like just grab a car and disappear. And like, I mean, they're not going to steal it. They're just going to like abscond with it for a while and have no sort of participation. They might have no manners. They might drink all your whiskey at dinner and vomit all over the place and like harass somebody. Like you as a brand, you're like, I don't need this. I just need people who are reliable. And generally speaking, they know if it's an outlet, like it doesn't matter who Motor Trend sends, you have this expectation that they're going to be a responsible individual because hey, they already got this job working for Motor Trend. Versus if you're just a content creator on your own, you have to sort of bridge that gap. I think that we've done that now, and that it doesn't matter what future social platform it would be, the automakers would be more open to it. But I'm sure there was a real challenge with a lot of those guys. I'm sure who are pulling their hair out, like YouTubers, 8 years ago, who were like, how can we not get on a press event? We have a way bigger audience. And now I'm sure they do. It just takes a little perseverance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we got to let you go, but before we do, it's to that topic. Yeah, there's always the trend that the new and the old. Like I remember when we started, it was these bloggers, these internet bloggers. We were all labeled. It was like a derogatory term, being a blogger, and like I don't know if that's what we were. And then it was the YouTubers, then it was the influencers, and now it's the TikTokers. And when you hear people talking like that, it's like you're just obviously worried about your job, which I get, but y'all also just don't get what's going on in the industry. Like I remember when I started at AutoGuide way back, and I'd go on the US trips, and you'd have guys on the trips who'd be like, oh, what do you do? And it'd be some guy that has a 2-minute spot once a week on a radio station in a city that has like less than 100,000 people. And you'd be like, but like back in the day, radio was so important. I mean, it still is if you have a national audience, or even a statewide audience, but he was probably reaching 1,000 people if he was lucky. And I was like, is that really worth their money anymore? So things change.
They sure do. Yeah. I always think the automakers should. I always think at a lot of those events that, it's the whole 80-20 rule. Like there's 20% of the people at those events, the journalists that are invited, that are delivering 80% of the content, like 80% of the eyeballs to the content anyway, right? So it's like, but then you can't just focus on them, because then you limit yourself. But there are ways to. I'm sure it was easier. I know we're running along. There was a guy I met at Ford who just worked for Land Rover back in the day, and he sort of said like he described it as the glory days, when it was literally just car and driver, Motor Trend, Road and Track, and he just said, he goes, it was 3 of them. He goes, we'd invite them to the Arctic Circle to drive Land Rovers. We'd go out in the middle of nowhere and drive cool Land Rovers for a day. He goes, we'd drink our faces off for 2 days, and then we'd fly back, and then they'd file a story a month later. And he was like, there was no deadline. Like there was like, he's like, that was like, he's like, from a PR perspective and from a journalist perspective, he was like, that was the greatest thing in the world. Like we would just have a riot. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty sweet. Now everyone's scratching to get a few more eyeballs and how quickly can I get this up, etc. So
yeah, after we finish recording this, I'm going to be hopping on a plane to fly to Europe and writing a story on a car I just drove because the embargo is Monday morning. When this episode goes live,
you feel our pain, is what you're saying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, at least embargoes are a little more common. Like I remember when we started, embargoes weren't a thing, and you would do the drive and the video, and on the flight home, I'd be writing the story. Our video guy would be editing the story, so when we land, we could hopefully be one of the first to get it out. And at least you get a little of time. But there's so much more we can talk about the Canadian media landscape, because we always had it different. But we should get going. We can always have you back on because you're on every week anyway. So we'll take a quick break on the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. And Colin will be right back to talk F1 with me. And Kyle will be back in a little bit to talk about what's ahead.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Colin.
Bye.
Okay, welcome back. Well, Colin is still here or back, depending on where you came into this show. And now we're going to do our normal segment with you, talking F1. And hey, there's a lot of news. What a surprise. So let's get right into it, because there's lots to talk about.
There's always lots and lots. Maybe the most interesting thing, I don't know if you saw this, Mike, separately.
Oh, yeah.
So Bottas being always hilarious on, it's funny, I always say, like, I'm a Max Verstappen fan. I don't even follow Max Verstappen on social media. I don't really care. But Bottas is always funny. So follow him. And what did he post the other day with this hilarious video of him with his cowboy hat, walking along, finding a Cadillac Escalade, and it's him and somebody of him asking some questions about it. And he's obviously, there's like, oh, there's a seat. And he goes, oh, there's 2 seats. He's like, there's 2 available seats. And they do this whole sort of shtick. And it kind of ends with like, oh, do you want to get in the seat? And he's like, not yet. And he kind of taps it. So it couldn't be more obvious that, maybe he's just playing to the, trying to get some credibility and get the seat. But it seems like this is a way of, not so covertly saying that he's going to be a Cadillac driver in the near future. So,
or he's just being the master troll that he's always been. That guy posts more on social media than most social media like influencer types. Like he's a master of it. And someone said like if him and Perez, or I don't think you get the results, but him and Ricardo were the drivers, like they'd just be a marketing machine for Cadillac, knowing they're not going to do well for the first year or two. And yeah, everyone would follow. Like you said, my favorite drivers, I think maybe I follow, but they don't post as much. But this guy, every time I open Instagram, there's like 6 stories from him.
Yeah, and they're almost always good. He has lots of hilarious stuff. His whole his nude calendar or whatever of him and his butts everywhere. Like it's just it's the funniest thing is that we never knew this side of him when he was at Mercedes. Like it didn't exist. He didn't they obviously were very careful about public personas, right? And it was like they as soon as he moved away from Mercedes, you're like, who is this? Is this guy like having a midlife crisis or something? And I think that's who he always was. He just kept a lid on it. So I very much enjoy his antics.
Yeah, and kudos to Mercedes now that he's the reserve driver for letting him do it. Like
Yeah.
I think they realized, oh, this is better than him just sitting around. Did you see the one where he talks about how hard he's working for Mercedes and it's just him sipping coffee and being on his phone?
I got a double laugh out of that one because I watched it and I thought it was really funny and I had volume off, right? I wasn't listening I didn't even have any music. I was like, oh, this is funny, haha. And then I go to show my wife and I turn it on and the audio's on and it's got the music from The Office. And I was like, oh, it's even better. I'm like, it was perfect.
But he was asked recently about Cadillac and he flat out said, like, of course we're in talks. So yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I think regardless who the second driver we've talked about before, some rookie they want to sort of mold or another veteran, like he is your veteran driver on one side.
Oh, totally.
Him, Perez for a couple of years works, but then it's sort of where do you go when you have your own engine and you're ready to hopefully compete higher, because they'll both be Like, that's 4 years from now. They'll both be a lot older. So
Yeah, well, I mean, if Cadillac's serious about this long term, they need to start building a funnel, right, of
yeah,
people to bring up, right? So they've got maybe some Chevy drivers and lower series, et cetera, but they got to start thinking about that, stealing some IndyCar drivers,
I was
maybe.
gonna say
Yeah,
maybe bring Oldsmobile back and be an Indy engine, and you can start developing through Indy.
sure, Mike.
The
All
roar
right,
of V8 never died. All right, on to the next story.
here's my crazy story of the day. This is just totally ludicrous, but so we talked before, like, I think last week, about how Lando Norris might not be, he's in risk of not being the number one driver anymore. Is he at risk of his seat? Da, da, da. So I don't think that's true, right? But at the same time, here we go. This is free practice one classifications from the Austrian Grand Prix, just finished moments ago here. Alex Dune, rookie. First time, I believe, ever driving a F1 car in free practice, winds up fourth, just a little behind Piastri. So, it's if you're not moving forwards, you're moving backwards. And so, holy crap, here's McLaren actually has a really good, backup. And I believe Alex Dune is currently the Formula 2 points leader as well. So, McLaren's going to be rich with talent and not know what to do with it. So
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, Norris has a huge contract and he's going nowhere. Like this is the reason he's in his seat as opposed to Piastri as well. It's a result of not last week, but last race. It's Piastri is your decided points leader, and unless he has a big issue and Norris catches back up, you got to treat him like the number one driver now. So it makes sense. As far as his performance, I mean, he's a super talented driver, but at the same time, remember when Russell first went into the Mercedes, or Behrman went into the Mercedes? It's like you get in a good car and you're a good driver, you're going to put in a good time.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe this shows also the maybe ease of how easy the McLaren is to drive, and also just what a rocket ship it is. That good for Alex doing that. But this goes to my whole theory of, you've got a guy who shows up, who you walk into a great car and you look like a superstar. If Alex Dune, you would put him into a Williams today, he'd be 16th, right, or something, right? Like, I'm sure he would have been. He would, way down the list, and then no one would talk about him at all. But
still better than the Red Bull.
better than Yuki. Oh no!
But like Antonelli, we've talked about, and he's a lot of. But again, with free practice, you don't know.
Yeah, free practice is. I generally don't put a lot of faith in it, but this also, you have to sort of, compare it to what else is out there. And I think the fact that, last race saw, Russell win, Verstappen, like, that's a pretty normal running order. So then I start to say, okay, that looks realistic. Having Bortoleto in sixth is a bit surprising, but again, sometimes you don't read too much into the rest of it. So
where's your biased reporting column? Where's your story about Charles losing his Ferrari seat with Dino down there in 18th?
Next week, I'll dig it up.
All right. So moving on. Hey, there's an old Red Bull driver.
An old Red Bull driver, and maybe a new Red Bull employee. So that's the story here. And apparently Vettel has said that he is in fact in talks with Red Bull, not as a driver, but as a consultant of sorts, like some role. And there's sort of been this discussion that he could replace Helmut Marko. And I kind of don't know how that's possible. Like Helmut Marko is such a, evil dictator vibe, right? Like he is just such this like manipulative Mr. Burns in the background, like win at all costs, Machiavellian. I say that Vettel seems like such a nice guy, but if you recall when he raced, he was kind of a jerk too, right? So him and Weber came to blows. So maybe Vettel's got a mean streak in him, and he could be Red Bull's new evil dictator. So.
You know what? Red Bull's spiraling. We all know this. I mean, Max is doing fantastic for the situation he's in. Like, I know we've talked about the car and being razor edge and whatnot. I really don't think it is a front runner. I think he's just up there. Like, I don't think it's as bad as the second driver always is, but that's because it's built for Max. But I honestly think it's probably the fourth car on the grid. I think it's behind Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren. Yeah. So with Ford coming in next year, who knows what's going on in the background? Maybe they're like, you know what, we kind of want a better image. So yeah, like I think Vettel would be the good combo. He has this great image, so marketing, but I think he is tougher in the background than we think. Although I thought he was sort of against F1 and their pollution ways. So this is.
I know it is a bit, yeah. Well, it's money talks, right? Same with Lewis Hamilton. He hates it, and then he friggin' flies on jets all year long to do all this stuff. So there's a lot of I don't know, hypocrisy might not be quite the right word, but maybe here we should start a new rumor just right here that Vettel's not going to come in to replace Marco, but Christian Horner.
That would be that'd be good. And
switch to
he
Ford.
Got a great voice and image for the next Drive to Survive, and Christian shows up on some random team as the disgruntled employee.
There you go.
There we go.
All right, more. This is,
Red Bull.
Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't my intention. I just went to Instagram. So,
Sainz is aged. Oh wait, this is that.
This is basically, he confirmed, Carlos Sainz Sr., that he will not be running for the presidency of the FIA next year. So, and basically his letter sort of, he said that the main reason, I think it's complicated, there's a lot of politics, no duh, but that he's going to be running Dakar this year, and he feels like he couldn't sort of stay true to his Ford Dakar responsibilities if he was trying to run for the presidency. So we won't see him replacing anybody anytime soon. And I mean, I don't know what that means for the FIA, but Carlos Sainz will probably be sitting top of the podium again. Interesting that it's with a Ford Red Bull tie-up, because Ford and Red Bull are now Formula One as well. So they're just best buddies everywhere here.
Well, yeah, and it's good for them to be doing something like that and not have these weird different partnerships all over. But yeah, for Sainz to run FIA, he has the Ford Red Bull connection. His son is in Ferrari. Like there's a lot of conflict of interest, and not that any dad would ever run something and keep their son on top of things.
Never. That's a crazy idea, Mike.
Yeah, no Aston Martin ties there.
Oh boy.
And our final story is Red Bull.
Yes. Oh, look at this. This is funny. I guess you can see what shows up in my social media feed. Good. I feel like I've been checked here, Mike, so I appreciate that. Arvid Lindblad. So this is he's going to be racing. Apparently, he did a test in Imola in an old AlphaTauri. He's a Formula 2 driver. He will apparently be replacing Yuki for FP1 at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So he's very much seen as Red Bull's up and comer, the next Max, as it were. So he already got his exception to a super license, even though he's 17. So I don't think he'll be replacing Yuki before the end of the season. But
he's next year's driver, I think. New car, new power plant. You have Max, but the problem for him is this is going to be too soon in a car that's hard to drive. Who knows?
And maybe next year's car won't be hard to drive. Although if Max has all this input in it, it might still be. So,
and Newey's gone and all sorts of things. But I think he'll be okay, and I only wish the best. I mean, Antonelli and some other youngsters have shown Behrman how well they can do. It's just history's not on his side. But it's funny you talk about the FP1. There's all these reports like another F1 driver is losing his seat this year because he's doing that. It's like we just talked about. Charles and Lando aren't in their cars this week in FP1, and I don't think they're losing their jobs. So it's this is how it works. They want to see how he can do, and if it's worth bringing him up next year, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you for joining us twice this week. We will be back next week. We'll have the fallout from the Australian Grand Prix.
Austrian.
Oh, Austrian. Sorry. We already did Australia. Right, Austrian Grand Prix, which I love this race.
Same.
Maybe it's because I get to play it in video games, so I'm familiar to the track. But I think it's a very unique track. People rip on it because it's like, Formula sponsored, blah, blah, blah. But it's crazy with those tight corners and the little bit of elevation. And if you go to it and you sit on the top of the hill, you can see the whole thing. It's a place I want to go sometime for sure.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a Sao Paulo vibe. Not quite, it's not there, but it's got a little bit of that. It's a short, kind of direct track. I don't know. I like it too. I don't totally know why I like it either, but I do.
But they designed it where it doesn't cater to one car. There's a lot of straight speed, there's a lot of tight corner, a lot of high speed corner. So yeah, Sao Paulo is that's my favorite track. And anyone in F1, if you ever want to bring me to a track, these two, I'll go tomorrow. I'll go anywhere really.
Yeah, Hungary, you name it, we're there.
There's a lot of manufacturers joining next year that maybe want some coverage. So
that's right. We got to start sucking up to them now.
we will shamelessly shill ourselves to go attend.
Sold.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care, Mike.
Okay, well, that just about wraps up another episode of the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. We'll just quickly tell you what we've been up to and what's ahead. So this week, I am driving the Volvo EX90, which I won't get into too much. I talked about charging it. Charges fast. But there's good and bad, but we will wait for the review on it. What about you, Kyle?
Well, we're catching me on the only real day I'm home this week. I just got back from California. When this goes live, this episode, you can go read my first drive on the Honda CR-V Trail Sport, which is a new trim for the CR-V lineup this year. I won't share my thoughts until next podcast. And then I'm going to be hopping on a plane, and I will be in Europe when this goes live, because I'm going to be driving the revised Lexus RZ. So it has more range, more power, a sporty trim with fake gear shifts and everything. And I'm kind of excited. I always thought there was a good basis there, and it just needed to be tweaked a little bit. So yeah, looking forward to it. I just have to do a fair amount of packing and laundry in the 24 hours that I'm home.
Yeah, just a lot of tweaking it got. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you think, because its siblings have all got the same updates. So next week, quickly, I will have a mini convertible, which great summer car, and it's my son's birthday, so he loves driving a convertible. So yeah, it all just works out. I'm looking forward to that. I haven't driven a mini convertible in a while. What are you doing?
I have a sibling, not really, but a BMW. I have the M4 CS. I drove it very, very briefly.
Same car.
In Europe last year when I did the M5 launch. So now it's what's it like to live with. And the CSs are always really good. They're pricey. So I'm wondering if this is going to be the same thing, where it's going to be the best driving M4, but is it worth the money? So yeah, that's my week once I get home.
Yeah, you're right. Same thing. I think the CS actually stands for Cooper Sedan, so it's just like the Mini.
Yeah,
totally. That's exactly what it means.
Anyway, basically the same car.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, that wraps up another episode. We will be back next week with some of the stories we previewed and a whole bunch of other stuff. So until then, we'll see you next week.
So long, everybody.
Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need, at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love.